Hello, everyone. It is week 19, episode 19 of Washed Up, and we are here in Washington, D.C. I'm Colin, this is Abby, and we are here to discuss the weekly news from a Gen Z standpoint so that you don't have to listen to the legacy media that your grandparents do.
I am very excited for this episode. 19 is actually my lucky number because my birthday, I was born on December 19th. So I've always chosen 19 as one of my little lucky numbers in terms of when I do things like stand in line or anyways, 19 is my lucky number, so I'm very excited for this episode.
Yeah, well, kind of like Taylor Swift with 13, you have a thing with 19?
Yes, exactly that. Except I think that 19 is much cooler than 13. So I'm pretty excited. I feel like every week I say this. I cannot believe that we're here doing this. And I think this is what, our third or fourth, and maybe only our third in-person episode.
Yeah, like I think four now, maybe. But we've been in Washington, D.C. for a couple of weeks now, and it's definitely been ramping up in terms of things we've been able to do. Like last weekend, we went to the Army Parade for the 250th birthday of the Army. Also, Donald Trump's 79th birthday, as people were pointing out. So that's really going to be, I think, the main focus of our episode today is talking about our experience with that and just how it kind of ties in with geopolitics at the moment.
Yeah, I in the past episode, we talked about how we went to the Pride Parade, and then we also talked about how we had to go to the military parade because it was, at least I said it kind of felt like a necessary evil pre-going because we are here. It is something that has never happened to this scale, and we needed to see it for ourselves and make judgments on our own. And especially being in DC, we really are in the heart of a lot. That's what's happening. So it's like if you can go, it seems way better to me to see it with my own eyes, to see everything that's happening and not get that third party resource, that third party, like from the legacy media. Either way, we probably would have covered it, but the difference is Colin and I got to experience it in person and immerse ourselves within that story because we're here instead of looking it up or listening to other independent commentators. Like I have been doing that as well and looking at how people have interacted with it on social media and whatnot, but it is cool to say that we are able to more fully get into our stories now that we're here and especially both in person together.
I have to say there was something kind of validating about actually going and then seeing it and then seeing how other outlets reported on it because I think a lot of what other outlets said kind of mirrored our initial impressions of it. And I don't know, it's validating in a way because it feels like our journalistic instincts are kind of on point. Like it makes sense. We've been working really hard to develop them over a period of years, but anytime you see your own views being mirrored or being kind of the mainstream also. We try to provide you the take that's not exactly mainstream, but it's helpful to know that we're at least swimming in the same waters as these mainstream outlets and seeing the same things.
I think it's the same feeling as when we see something happen and we said we quote predicted it. It gives me that same sense of validation, like, oh my gosh, I'm not crazy, or oh my gosh, I'm not totally off the mark on this, in that, like you said, we've been developing our journalistic instincts. We've been doing things like keeping up with the news and researching, and it feels good to form your own opinion about something and hear it resaid in a different way or hear other people agree with it without having done that research before, right? Like without having been influenced before, you with your own self and your own mind and your own intuition decided something and other people agree with me, not even with me telling them and not even with me doing any other research besides the fact that I experienced it myself.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. And I wonder personally, like, what do I get out of that? I think maybe part of it is a sense of control. Like, I feel like, oh, I am able to predict these things. But at the end of the day, I have to recognize too, fundamentally, a lot of the current events that are going on are very unpredictable. And whatever like little hit of validation that I get from seeing my perspective mirrored in the mainstream media is not like the end all be all. And certainly there's a lot that gets missed by the mainstream media too that we'll just never see them report on because we all have different experiences of reality. It
And I
seems
think the
different.
reason why it's so fun to keep up with people like us and people like other independent commentators is we have so much control over what we put out. I mean, we've talked about this time and time again, but in the beginning, we thought that we had to cover every single thing until one day it was like Colin and I said, wait a second, we have free will. Why not just cover the things that we want to cover? And I think that's what's made our experience and our podcast so special and so much better throughout the weeks is that we're able to actually do the things we want to do. And now that we're together, we can go to the things we want to go to.
And there's definitely a part of me with this whole parade that was like, I don't want to go and cover this, but I don't know. We sort of decided last episode, like, oh, we'll go, we'll cover it. But if I'm being honest, like, as the week went on and as we approached the actual day of the Army Trump parade, I was very reluctant and very much did not want to go. Had security concerns. I didn't know how they were going to mitigate that possible threat. And I just was like, I don't want to feed into the glorification of Donald Trump in some way, shape, or form. And that was my biggest concern. Luckily, but I think both of those concerns were kind of mitigated when I went there, and I was actually pleasantly surprised. But yeah, do you want to get into a little bit of like what we saw, what your experience was there, and if you had any reservations about going too?
Oh, I think I had more reservations than you. We were talking about it. I think like you said, we made that decision on last episode and we were like, do I have to go? And I genuinely think I wouldn't have gone if you weren't here with me. Like I think about how you went to inauguration on your own and like I don't even think I would have done that. And I really didn't want to do this, especially when I think I would have been much more comfortable in an environment like No King's Day was happening at the same time, all the protests all across the country, and definitely in DC. I had seen videos of it in Bethesda, and that is something that I do think that I'm much more comfortable and like more up my alley in terms of covering because there's a lot more people like probably our age, like stuff like that. Maybe not in a sense of security because I'm always not too sure what will happen at a protest. You can't always encourage, or even with peaceful protests, you can't always know if it's going to be completely peaceful or if it's going to turn out violent or anything like that. So there's always a security issue, just like with any big event. Like, I mean, I was also scared about security going into the military parade as well. But I think what made me decide going to this is that I think that Colin and I have such a unique, interesting niche take on things like this, especially going to it. I mean, it was a pretty expected crowd. Like you had a lot of military veterans, people involved with the military, and then Trump supporters. Like there were just these insane like conversations I think we were overhearing, as
Yeah,
well
standing
as
in line.
yeah.
We were by a lot of Trumpers right behind us in line, so we were kind of listening to their conversation in between our own conversation, and yeah, some of the comments they had I think were pretty telling. Just they come from a different background, and maybe they probably seemed like they came from out of state or even traveled like just for this event. And personally, I would probably wouldn't have, but like good on them for
Would not
making the
have.
trip. And some of the comments they made, I don't exactly remember all of them, but I remember there was just sort of like a tone of insensitivity about it, and neither of us is really the kind of people to get really bent out of shape about sensitivity
Hmm.
or like that kind of thing. But definitely it was noticeable. Like you could tell, I feel like you could tell standing in line who was there for Trump and who was there for the army and who was just there because it was happening and maybe they lived close by, which was the category that we fell into.
Hmm.
And I think it was probably, my guess was like 20% people like us who were just in
I
DC,
would say less.
maybe
Maybe like
less.
15
Yeah, maybe like 30 to 40 for the army and then the rest was probably
from.
Trump. So it was a interesting breakdown. I'm, as I've said on this show, very bad at estimating crowd sizes just by looking at it. I have no concept or really skill for that, but there was definitely several thousand people total, I'd say.
Yeah, gosh, do you have on the top of your mind what um Trump predicted, or at least the Trump admin said how many people would go?
No, I don't. I think Trump is similarly bad at predicting crowd sizes, but he'll just go in the other way and say that there was millions and millions of people
I don't know if
there for.
I think he's purposely bad. Like, I think he just does that just to boost his ego, but I something interesting I actually wanted to bring up. I don't even think I talked to you about this, but one of my friends was asking me like, "Oh, how was it? Was it as dead as I saw on social media?" Because there's been a lot of like social media reports of it being completely empty, like no one there at all, stuff like that. And I will say it wasn't completely empty. Like
Hmm.
I think that the videos that are circulating social media are the ones before the parade even started. Like, at least what it looked like to me, there was nothing going on. So I'm assuming that those videos are probably taken around like, because the parade started at 6:30. I'm assuming that those videos were taken around like 4:30, maybe 5, because there were a good amount of crowds there. It wasn't to the point of like sardines. Like, I didn't think I was being crushed there. I've had like an immense amount of space. Like there was so much space um in like the fenced off areas in the grass. And I didn't think that it was an overwhelming amount of people, but I also wouldn't say that it was dead. And that's my critique I have on the media. Going to a place like, or an event like this, and then seeing it firsthand, and then seeing what's been reported on, like, I guess, like more left-leaning media or like left-leaning people. I hate Trump a lot. I don't like that man. But I'm also not one to encourage lying on the media or encourage like an exaggeration of a narrative that was blatantly false.
Yeah, like it wasn't exorbitantly crowded. It was certainly, in my estimate, less people than inauguration for sure.
Hmm.
I mean, DC was really inundated by Trump supporters for inauguration, and it was much less than that. But it did take us about an hour and a half, 2 hours to get all the way from the start of the line when we joined all the way into the National Mall. And we had to go through a security checkpoint and a lot of like switchbacks. It was kind of funny. It felt like you said it was like evil Disneyland or something.
Oh yeah. I
That was
said it
pretty,
was like an effed up version of Disneyland.
yeah.
And I said it and I thought you didn't hear me.
Oh
I
no,
was
it's
like,
funny.
yeah, it was
But
so
so it
funny.
took us like several hours just to get
Well,
in.
insert this video of us going like this. It was genuinely like
Nauseating.
I was getting dizzy like because the, it was like this for like I want to say 5 to 10 minutes at least.
Yeah, who knows? I couldn't tell you how long. It felt like it went on forever. And we finally did get in, and we there was only two entry points into the mall. The whole mall had fencing around it, the same
Mhm.
fencing they used for inauguration. And so there's only two points of entry into the actual grassy area that you're describing. And we got there, I think we timed it perfectly when we showed up and when we left. And I think that if we had gotten there any later, it would have been completely dead. We would have been waiting around bored. If we'd gotten there later, we would have had a harder time getting through because by that point the line was much longer. And there were people waiting to get in even when we were getting out. So I really felt like it just depended on when you showed up, how busy you perceived it to be. But for us, it was fine. And what was your reaction to walking into the mall and we got to see Trump in person? So what was your thoughts on that?
I've never been so close to a president in my life, like physically close, obviously. Um, it I it was crazy because I think Colin we had entered around what like 6:20 I want to say if the parade started at 6:30. I swear we got there like right before the parade started.
Oh, I remember this, yeah.
And we like get there and we're walking towards the biggest grassy area and the announcer goes, and welcoming to the stage, JD Vance. And I turn to Colin and I go, what the fuck? I, and it was funny because I don't know if it's because I did no research on it at all, or maybe it was Pete Hegseth first.
I think it was Hegseth, and then we made like really alarmed eye contact, and then I think I said something like, "So much was just exchanged in that moment." Like between the two of us, because they're like Pete Hegseth, and we
I think you
kind
turned
of
around and looked at
was like,
me
"What?
and I
Like,
like
come again?
and
He's
like
still the defense secretary?"
I know I'm like he wasn't like fired. Um yeah, I'm not a Hegseth fan.
No.
Um, but I remember in line before we even entered, I think one of us had said, so is Trump gonna be at this thing? Like, is he gonna say something? I don't know why I just didn't expect him and his posse to like be on the stage and be watching the entire time and like there the entire parade, but he was and they were. And so when JD Vance and or when Hegseth and JD Vance were announced, um, I said, surely Trump is going to come out next, and he did,
They
and
played
she
Hail
was
as his
there.
chief and all that.
Yeah, Trump was there, Melania was there, Vance and his wife were there.
Rubio.
Yeah, you know, poor guy.
And I remember at one point they panned and it showed like they had Kristi Noem there, and then they had um, Linda McMahon,
Oh
and
yeah.
I went to Abby's like, "There's our bestie. She's up there with him," because we've went and saw her in a past episode we talked
Yeah,
about.
I mean, arguably one of our best episodes. I think that this will be a good one too, because I like the fact that we're able to talk about it in first person.
It was definitely like the first, I would say, really high profile event that we've been able to attend together since being both in DC. And it was just fun for that reason, in my opinion. Like, it felt like we were there. We saw other people from the press, and it felt like we were kind of there with them a little bit. Like, we saw like photographers and we saw a couple of people with press badges, and we didn't have any kind of thing like that. We just were there as independent people. But I felt some sort of like camaraderie with those press people, and it felt like I don't know, just like this kinship that I don't know. Did you feel that at all?
Yeah, I actually wanted to create us and or get us like press passes, but I didn't have time with my current job right now. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll attend as a civilian. But it was funny because I also had plans after, and I had told Colin, I was like, is this giving military parade by day and dinner by night or what? Like it was just so silly. But going back to talking about being there with the press, I also think that Colin and I specifically have an eye for like people who are journalists or people who are there to cover it. Even people without press passes who had like big cameras and were taking photos. It was sort of raining at one point, just like drizzling. And I like put my umbrella and I was trying to hide my face and I told Colin like they better not snipe me right now, like in terms of like snipe a photo of me because I would have been pissed. Like I do not want to be perceived in that way as a person attending this because like in my mind I'm there covering it even though we didn't have any identification of the sort to prove that.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess going back a little bit to seeing Trump in person, um, I mean, I've seen him before in the past at the Naval Academy and just in DC in his limo sometimes, but never that close and never for that period of time. Like he was just sitting up on the stage, probably I want to say like 50 to 75 feet away
Yeah,
from
he was
us.
like right here.
And he was across Constitution Ave. We were on the National Mall. He was across the street on a little platform that had like army written on it, and all the cabinet members and whatnot we just said, and they had like a little bulletproof kind of glass case around it. But other than that, it was pretty clear view from where we were of him, and I was kind of like watching him out of the corner of one eye, and then trying to watch the parade out of another. And at one point, we backed up a bit to go stand before like a big jumbotron and got to watch. I was literally watching him with my left eye and that with my right eye, and trying to gauge like his reactions as it was unfolding. But so what do you think about the actual parade and maybe his some of his reactions and all that?
I think Trump looked miserable up there personally. Like, did you? I didn't see that man smile once.
He
I don't
wasn't
think.
smiling. I don't know if I would say miserable,
Maybe
but
he just has resting miserable
oh,
face.
yeah, well, I think so, yeah. He seemed very solemn.
Like very, yeah, it
And
seemed more like a
early on they did sing happy birthday to him. Like there was a crowd again across from him on the street. They sang happy birthday. It was pretty subdued. It was I don't want to say he seemed almost embarrassed by it, but he did kind of just like
he didn't
go through the motions.
react in a way of like, oh my God, yeah, it's my birthday, but more so he was just like kind of nodding, I
Mhm.
would say. And it was like a slight acknowledgement that it was his birthday, but not super out there. In the Trumpy out there way, he didn't do that. And I don't know if he was advised not like to do something like that because I would expect to Trump, like based off past behavior, if the crowd was singing happy birthday to him, like whatever, whatever, I would expect him to say some shit like, yes, it's my birthday. And this parade just happens to fall. I'm the greatest ever.
Coincidence.
What? Yeah, exactly. Like I could see that happening, and surprisingly that didn't happen. But yeah, his reactions were very, like you said, like kind of solemn. He saluted he saluted the different what's the word for that? Like I don't want to say groups, but I
Yeah,
guess groups.
the coolest part, I think, was it turned out to be kind of a history of the army, starting with the Revolutionary War, going to like Civil War, World War One, Two, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq. Like there was sort of a progression to it. And it was cool to see all of like the technology that they used to have, how it progressed and evolved, and probably the coolest part was the flyovers that they would do over the mall.
Legendary quarter-ton 4x4 command recon vehicle, the Jeep. You might have a Jeep in your driveway, but not like this.
Where they had Vietnam helicopters.
Now, they helped define the Vietnam War. That staccato beat of the rollerblades was a welcome sound to many troops mired in combat.
I think later helicopters from maybe Iraq, Desert Storm.
I had never seen anything like that in my life. Um, the what was the first thing? The parachuters?
Oh yeah, the paragliders, paratroopers.
Paratroopers.
Yeah.
Okay. So it opened with that first, and I did not even know what was gonna happen. I didn't know there were people. Like I wasn't like maybe I just was like in shock of just like
You looked pretty shocked. I'm not gonna lie. As soon as we saw Trump, you like kind of had this look on your face, like he's like right there, and I was like, "Are you in shock?" I was like, "Are you like?" It was really funny to me, but you had said like this is the first time you'd really been that close to a president, let alone like Donald Trump, who we talk about so much, and then I think it only went up from there when they started jumping out of the plane, and yeah,
that was effing crazy to me, Colin.
it
Like
was pretty
I
crazy, yeah.
have you seen anything like that before? I've never
Yeah.
seen anything like that before. And I mean like you have like more
Sometimes at the
family
Naval
and
Academy they do
yeah.
drills like that where they, jump out, but
Yeah, that was crazy. It was like America's top or like the world.
I
I
think
don't
they're
know.
called like the Golden Warriors or the Golden Knights or something like
That's
this.
what it sound because I'm from Vegas. That's our hockey team name. So yeah, they are called something like that because I was like, wait, hockey? Like what's going on? Um, but they started jumping out of the plane and one of them landed so hard that I like turned to Colin and I was like,
Yeah.
is that normal? Like I'm scared for this guy. Like he like plummeted. I didn't
Yeah.
find anything on the news that said he was hurt.
Yeah, I was looking for a headline like that though, because literally there was most of them were like floating down kind of gently, and then a couple were coming in really hard, and he came in like either right behind the platform that Trump was on, or like in the White House lawn area, and he just slammed down. But we didn't see him actually land, and I asked someone about this. I was like, do you think he was okay? Because he was really coming in fast, and they said some of them are really good at maneuvering so that they can like pick up some momentum to land, but then at the last second they'll like I don't know maneuver their parachute so it'll catch them. But it looked painful to me.
Yeah,
That's all I
that
can
did
say.
look painful to me. Not that I've ever jumped out of a plane or a helicopter before. But I'd assume that was something painful. Otherwise, the parade itself, storytelling wise, I did not expect that. I think going into it, I really, really was like, oh, this is so dictatory, blah, blah, blah. I still think it's dictatory for other reasons, like monetary reasons. But the parade itself, taken out of context, taken out of what's going on right now, taken out of the fact that $49 million was spent
Yeah, that's
on
that's
it.
a lot. That's too much.
Yeah, way too much. Taken if you somehow ignore all of these facts, the storytelling itself was something I just did not expect, like Colin had said. It went through the history of all the different like machinery, I guess, that was used throughout different wars. The script itself, I didn't appreciate too much.
It could have
It
used some work. So they should have workshopped it a little bit.
yeah, I haven't looked up if I could find the script online, but like for example, they talked about like Iran at one point, right? And they
Uh,
said something like
oh, okay. In Vietnam, they're talking about how it was like the sound of the chopper was a welcome sound for all of the American troops who had been injured, and
I'm like,
I'm
what's
like,
that a welcome
I don't know, I
sound?
can't imagine many people were like, thank God. I mean, yeah, maybe they had like medevacs and stuff, but like, also think about how many people it was not a welcome sound for because they're being attacked by those same choppers. So I don't know. It was obviously very like from the perspective of the army, kind of being like, look at how far we've come and look at all of our technology and how powerful we are. Although, to be fair, it didn't have the tone of like we're the greatest and mighty and we could like end any country in the face of their. It wasn't like that at all. But it was just like subtly the scripting, like you had said, was sort of biased in favor of military action. And that's something I think both of us on this show are not biased in favor of. So we noticed it, and probably if we were writing the script, would have written it differently. But That's fine.
I definitely wouldn't have written the script like that. I'm very much anti-war, which I mean we'll get into more when we talk about current events right
Yeah,
now.
seriously.
Which right now it's like again, if I talk about the parade itself, it was something I'd never seen and I wouldn't even dream of going on my own to. And I don't regret going to it. I think that after too, we had gotten a lot of content, and I think Colin and I both were like, okay, so like when should we post this? Also like how do we post this in a way of like we were just covering it and like it was cool, but also it wasn't because of the context. And I think, right, we were going kind of back and forth about it a little bit in that way, just because, I mean, if you know us, you would know, but if you don't, like many things are taken out of context, you would probably not assume that the reason why we're there is to cover it and the reason, like,
Yeah, I mean, just
yeah,
like we didn't want to leave this impression of like everyone else is out there on No King's Day protesting authoritarianism. Meanwhile, we're out here like with Donald Trump living it up, having a party. Like
because that's
that
not
was
what it
not
was.
at all the I don't think that was our mentality going into it. If anything, I think my mentality was I was expecting it to be kind of a display of his authoritarian tendencies, and I was expecting to go there and to cover that and to say like this happened, this happened, this happened. If anything went wrong, we were going to talk about that. We were going to be fair about it, and I think I said last episode, I had an open mind that it would be fun. Ultimately, it kind of was fun, and I did enjoy it, and it felt almost like a 4th of July
Yeah,
activity.
that's what it felt like to me
And
too.
was like, I would do it again. I'm sure we'll probably go to something for 4th of July, and I anticipate it'll be about the same. But it wasn't in any way like a fun PR. We weren't there to do PR for Donald Trump. He doesn't need us to do PR for him. He's perfectly capable of doing his own.
I'm Donald
And
Trump's anti-PR personally. Whatever the fuck that or whatever that is.
my basic takeaway was that it was enjoyable and I would do it again, but in the context of everything that's happening, there it left something to be desired. And I think the whole event itself could be summarized with this headline from the Washington Post, which was Trump wanted a military spectacle, instead he got a history lesson. And I think that's hilarious because, like we said, they were, it was mostly centered on the army, less so about Trump. Didn't have as much authoritarianism as we thought it would. And so, from that standpoint, I think maybe even Trump was disappointed potentially about how subdued it was. But I enjoyed that it was subdued. I had fun.
I'm so glad it was subdued. That proved me wrong because I think before, again, like you were saying, I did expect it to be more dictatory and like things such as that. But and I was telling Colin literally during the parade, like I think I'm anti-war. I think that the military still deserve to be honored, maybe in not a way that $49 million goes towards a parade, but in the way that like maybe this money should go towards, I don't know, like free education for veterans, like making sure veterans stay off the street, like people who enlist in the military who are targeted are usually the people who are maybe not as educated or maybe younger people who have no other option. Like I know people who are in the military or who do enlist because they want to go to college, which might not always be the case, but maybe we should have better programs for that. And I was seeing a lot of critique on that online actually as well, being like, yes, maybe it was an amazing spectacle, but like maybe it would have been a greater gift. I think that Trump would get a lot of praise if he had just announced like, "Hey, I'm giving $49 million to the military for
Yeah,
benefits."
right. Yeah, like you had mentioned and you texted me about this, like if they had put that money toward like veterans' mental health or the fact that many of them go into combat have PTSD and that PTSD can really derail their lives. They'll get addicted to drugs, maybe they end up homeless and like all of these issues, there's no shortage of veterans issues that I think that money would have gone a long way toward helping. and it would have been a fine PR move for Trump, probably better than how it ultimately turned out. And so, that's something to consider. But to be fair, I think the permits for this parade were given during, I think, Biden's administration. So, like,
Hmm.
they've been planning to have an event to celebrate the army, and like you said, I think that that's fine. Um, this was certainly, I think, amped up by Trump's enthusiasm for a military parade, which reportedly came from his viewing Bastille Day in France back in like 2017. So Trump really wanted this. They gave it to him. Maybe it wasn't what he was expecting, maybe it was, but regardless, the money would have been useful for veterans, I think.
I agree with that. I think that, yeah, 100%. I think the money could be used in a better way. But like I said, like I almost think that Trump's birthday overlapping with it and maybe this narrative of like, oh, we expected it to be more dictatorial, we expected it to be more this, more that, more Trump. It almost takes away from the fact that it was about the military. Like, I think that my reservations were about it weren't oh, I hate the military because I don't. I hate war for sure, but I definitely respect anybody who's willing to fight for our country. But I think that even Trump's overshadowing of it takes away from the military, which I'm not even sure people who are diehard Trump supporters or like even like diehard or not even diehard, just like Trump supporters in general realize like everything that goes around this man becomes seems to be tainted to me.
Yeah, I certainly. I mean, he does love to be the center of every single story, which is why it was more surprising that in this particular instance he wasn't. But that makes me wonder, well, certainly what it would have been like without him if this had been like a Kamala administration. How
Right.
could this event have gone instead? We'll never really know, but I'm sure that he was advised in some PR capacity. I have no like sources on this or anything, but the army probably wanted to also present a certain image, and they probably had to coordinate, like, okay, we don't want this to seem like a dictatorial military parade. We don't want it to be like goose stepping in the streets or anything like this. So they probably had to finally tune their own PR, the army's PR, and then they probably had to kind of make sure that Trump was somewhat on board with that so that it wasn't conflicting messaging. I'm not sure how any of that went down behind the scenes, but that's just kind of my speculation on it.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's validity in like our speculating of it in terms of like, oh, at this point I think that we know Trump, at least the Trump that he portrays, and I know like his general crowd's reaction to things. I will say, yeah, like in the beginning, just calling it back to like the crowd that was there, it was definitely majority Trump people, I'd say. I think at one point I asked Colin, like, how many people do you think here actually live in DC? And we guessed like maybe like what, 20%
Mhm.
of people, which is kind of insane to me. There were a lot of people in DC who I was talking to, and they were like, yeah, I can't believe this parade is happening, like very pissed off about it, basically, in terms of politics, but also in terms of just the fact that it was annoying.
I was pissed that the roads were closed for
Yeah.
several days leading up to and then after. And it was really just the day before and the day after mostly, where the Constitution Ave was shut down. Actually, it's still shut down. I was there today. But most of the roads are back open and it's fine now. But as I wrote about with the inauguration, anytime the barricades go up and it turns into like the city's on lockdown, it makes sense to me why DC doesn't like that because it literally, the traffic goes way, way up. People are just kind of agitated. You kind of feel this sense of like unease and like you can literally feel it in the air. It's palpable. And like we said, that didn't manifest in this occasion, but anytime you have events like that, I think DC rightfully is kind of irritated.
Yeah, I at this event, I even the morning of, I was telling Colin, I think, or at least when I saw you, I was like, it feels different in the streets. Like, I felt like there were less people out, and I think that it had to do with the fact that, I mean, there was a lot of protesting going on in Bethesda, plus there was this parade on Constitution Ave. So it's like when I was just walking the normal streets on the way there, or like when I was doing my errands in the morning, I did feel as if it was a bit emptier than normal. I kind of assumed that there was gonna be more crowds. I remember there was this guy who had these flags and like this whole stand, and the song that was playing was "It Wasn't Me." And I looked at each other and I was like, "What the F?"
I was like, that's actually a really perfect song for Trump, because the lyrics are about him like sleeping with someone else and cheating, and it's like it wasn't me, and I was like, that's Trump.
I was
That's
like,
well, Trump's mentality is like anytime something goes wrong, it wasn't me, it was my lawyer, it was my this, it was my this person in the cabinet. Like he'll just very good at that. So I thought that was funny, but we should probably go into a little bit of the context around. Even though the parade itself was fine and we even maybe enjoyed it, there's some big headlines about legislators who were killed. Really, I think it was right before
hmm
Saturday.
hmm
So, or maybe we woke up on Saturday to that headline. So, do you want to talk about that a little bit, the context of political violence and how this is still an ongoing issue?
Yeah, I think that that story tragic obviously like as I am anti-war, I'm anti a lot of violence. Like anti-violence. I'm anti-violence. Not even most violence, like all violence. I don't think you could even solve violence with more violence. Um, but I think when I saw that headline too, I had this increasingly bad feeling about going to the parade itself. And security and also just the violence against political leaders and people in the light as well, I think has definitely increased in the past two terms, I'd say. I remember in one of my classes we talked about that and how making yourself a political figure like that, especially in the way that it is now, almost invites this sense of like people thinking that they can revolutionize things by by violence. Like it kind of reminds me of the way that Gen Z thinks about Mangione a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean it's happened on both sides of the political spectrum, and it's really hard to draw like a one-to-one connection between like this person's rhetoric caused this person to act violently. And I don't think it's really a good idea to try to connect that, because I think we're all people with free will, and people who choose violence are choosing that for themselves. And yeah, they can be swayed by rhetoric, and some politicians thrive off of building the divisive rhetoric that leads to violence. But I think ultimately it's whoever is committing the violence responsibility for it. And in this case, I think it was two Democrat legislators in Minnesota. I think I have to check, but I think it was one was killed and one was pretty severely injured, and there was more that were on like this hit list that this guy had. And they did apprehend a person of interest in the case, but it was like a whole manhunt, and this was obviously like huge, huge headline that coincided with the parade. So it was just kind of alarming to see and to go into the parade having just read about it was alarming. And to what extent, again, Trump bears any culpability for that? I don't think it's fair to say that any one person causes another person violence, but it is important to look at who's ratcheting up the temperature. The same conversation happened right after Trump was shot last summer, and people were pointing fingers at, Democrat lawmakers and people who had ramped up the temperature on rhetoric about Trump, and did that lead to someone taking a shot at him? We'll never really know, but regardless, the overall trend of political violence seems to be going up, and that's very alarming. And the other one that comes to mind is when the congressional baseball game 8 years ago now was happening, and it was like allegedly a supporter of Bernie Sanders went and shot up the Republicans who were practicing for the baseball game. And I remember like Steve Scalise was shot. I know Rand Paul was there. It was just like a crazy event, and unfortunately, it seems like that is all too common. They target these lawmakers thinking that this is the way to make change happen, and it's sick.
It is sick. And I will say that like I think that reading that right before going to the parade, a very high profile, like obviously right-leaning event, I was very concerned about things like safety, security, stuff like that. But I'll call out the fact that they were actually very good with security. Not that I didn't think that they wouldn't be good at it, but for example, Colin only brought his tiny little wallet and they like literally patted it down, like almost like damn near like I wanted to say they
Like
were gonna like
bending my
yeah.
debit card, it was like, come on.
I like had brought my umbrella and they were looking at it. They went through like every little nook and cranny in my purse and I was like, damn, is this why we were taking so long? Like
This is where the $49 million went.
no, I know it was crazy. But I think that it wasn't wrong to do something like that. Even when we were standing in line, like I think Colin and I were getting kind of antsy because we had seen this guy with this backpack like jump the fence and just like start running. And I was like, that surely cannot be good. Do you remember how we like
Yeah, yeah.
looked at each other and we were like, so is no one gonna like do anything about that? This man just like ran into the parade with his backpack
I think
and
he ran into a part that he thought was gonna give him access to the mall and it didn't. It was like a separate area, but he hopped over one of the barricades, the like I don't know, waist level barricades to get out of the zigzag. And we both were like looking at it skeptically, as I think we should. Like we should be skeptical when we see people acting funny. And to the point of when Trump was shot last July, people saw the shooter up on the roof and they're like, is he supposed to be up there? Like, is that guy, what's he doing? And they pointed out to the police who were able to kind of have a back, like, I don't know, they tried to stop the shooter. They weren't successful, but like, you do have to keep your eyes open and point out when something seems suspicious like that.
see something, say something.
Yeah,
Like
I guess.
truly. Um,
But not like in a informing on your fellow citizens kind of way, but like if something seems off, like our advisor always said, if it smells like shit, then it probably is. If it looks like it's something is going awry, like yeah, point it out.
yeah, and I use that even as a sort of street smarts thing. Like there there's if there's something wrong, if you feel like something's wrong, then something might just be wrong. I never would ever advise anyone to go off of their gut intuition. And to be fair, my gut intuition was telling me something was going to go wrong at the parade, and maybe I was wrong about that one. But I think that it's better safe than sorry in like most scenarios. I was pleasantly surprised as much as I could be at a parade like that honoring a man that I think is a villain.
Fair. And speaking of things going awry and pointing them out, I wanted to say what's going on in Iran right now is
Hmm.
another thing we wanted to talk about with I think it does kind of coincide with the Trump parade and maybe is even related. I'm interested in how Trump has kind of done a 180 on his Iran policy. We were talking about how they're trying to make a deal to negotiate how much uranium enrichment Iran was going to be allowed to do, and we thought it was going to kind of settle somewhere back with what the Obama administration had negotiated. But then apparently the 60-day negotiating period ended, and Iran did not agree to the Trump deal that was being proposed. And Steve Witkoff was going to go over there and try to negotiate, but then Israel decided to launch a missile attack on select sites in Iran, including near the capital, where they were taking out these uranium enrichment sites and even Iranian leaders. And so, yeah, how do you feel like that maybe relates to the parade that we saw, if at all? Do you think,
I think that if there were better decisions politically happening, I wouldn't be as angry as I was at the parade. And as much as I wanted to fully like enjoy myself, I guess, at something like this, or like in the same way that I would enjoy myself at like a 4th of July event or something like that, I couldn't, mostly because I was thinking about like the context of what it's in, right? Like, I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that both of us kind of had that in the back of our minds.
yeah, I mean, the attack on Iran was really unsettling to me. I kind of feel like we're being slow walked into World War III with that. I'm very worried about that becoming a regional conflict that then draws in the US militarily with either troops on the ground or Iran retaliates on our bases where we have US troops. And I'm just very worried about the spillover effects of all of this. And it seems, I kind of feel like I'm a bit alone in saying that, besides a couple like very conservative commentators. Like I know Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Steve Bannon, and other Glenn Greenwald are all out there saying we don't want this to become a regional war that draws in the U.S. But I was very upset by the news of Israel's attack on Iran because Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, had said 8 weeks ago that there was no intelligence suggesting that Iran was trying to enrich uranium for a nuke. So I don't understand the sudden Trump policy switch up, and I that was very much top of mind when we went to go when I saw him like that Saturday.
It kind of felt, yeah, like I said, dystopian. When we were walking into, I remember seeing these like little children and their parents or something like that, like three kids or something like that. And it said they were wearing these shirts that said like two-time World War champions on it. And I think Colin and I had kind of lightly talked about being concerned we're gonna go into a World War III type situation. And seeing that very much felt wrong and
Propagandistic,
gross.
maybe.
Like, yeah, exactly that. Like what a way to spin something like that. And what a thing to make your child wear because there's little kids, like there's no way they know what that means.
And I think there's a difference between like being proud of your country versus prideful.
Right.
And I think like it's one thing to say we fought on behalf of these values that are important to us and we won two wars on that basis and that's something to be proud of and to commemorate. But you don't have to be prideful and be like, and we do it again in World War III. Like, no. Like, hopefully we've been in a period of relative peace, relative, since World War II, and we've kind of been moving globally in a direction of greater cooperation, and that's great. But that could very much be at risk if we're not careful, if we are being prideful, or our leaders are I think being fed wrong information from their own inner circle that is effectively going to, like I said, slow walk us into a greater regional war, if not global conflict.
Right.
And that's wrong.
Something I want to completely avoid for our country.
So yeah, I'm pretty ready to wrap it up with that.
I always really like recording episodes like this. It reminds me of our Linda McMahon episode, which I think is honestly still one of my favorites because it's very topical and it's very niche in that we're able to do a topic and then go deeper into it, which I like much better than being like, here's what happened this week, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, which is more of our like one, two, three episodes. And when people first get into our podcast, I at least in the last like couple of weeks, the new people I've met, the new friends I've made, whatever, the new connections, I've asked them to listen to either the Linda McMahon one or one of my other friends was listening. He was listening to the NATO one, which he said he liked. But I do think our later episodes are better because of that. And I think, not to jump the gun, but I think I'll feel this way about this episode as well.
Yeah, and we'll continue to lean into the fact that we're both here in DC. So, like, there's a myriad of opportunities that I'm really looking forward to taking advantage of this summer and just seeing where it goes. I think our audience likes those kinds of episodes, and we posted a funny, like, reel after the parade that it got a lot of traction. So, yeah, I'm just excited to keep that energy and momentum going.
Yeah, that one did get a lot of traction.
Ones that we do that are very centered around what's actually happening on the ground in DC. I think people appreciate those ones because to us it's just like another day in the swamp, but to them it's like this is breaking, this is insider knowledge. So we're happy to provide that when we can.
And like we always say, if you have anything you want us to report on, washedupweekly@gmail.com, or you could follow our Instagram at washedupweekly and DM us. We are both active on it. Or if you are our friend, you could definitely text us. But new fans are always encouraged to reach out as well.
Yeah. I think that's all we got this week.
Washed
Washed
up
up
out.
out.